We'll start. Well, hello everybody, and a very big thank you for joining us this evening. My name is Roger Jones. I lead the London Friends of Green Spaces Network Climate Resilience Group. I'm also one of the Friends of West Ham Park in East London, which is City of London owned park of about 77 acres, which we do quite a lot of activities in. And help to maintain and get the local community to appreciate the environment that they have there. Laura's managing the IT for us for the webinar this evening, so many thanks to her for doing that. The webinar, as I'm sure everybody's noticed when they logged in, is being recorded. So this evening, our special guest is Dr. Nicholas Cryer from the Royal Horticultural Society. He will talk about the impact of rainwater trends and availability on the ecosystem services provided by plants in London's open spaces and how climate change is impacting those systems. Nick expects to talk for about 30 minutes or so. However, he is very happy to take questions as we go and have more of a conversation than a formal lecture followed by questions. So if there are any burning questions as we go through, people would like to either raise their hand or just butt in, then we'll deal with the questions as they arise. A little bit about Nick. He joined the RHS at Wisley, middle of 2023, and he provides a science-led approach to water neutral components of their sustainability strategy. This means changing water sources to increase water resilience and to reduce the environmental impact of the RHS gardens all across the country. His role includes translating and promoting these methods to the nation's 30 million gardeners for sustainable greening of our cities and for the horticultural supply industry. So not a small task. The scientific approach is to understand water requirements at the landscape and individual plant levels, and then recommend changes to water management, plant choice, or irrigation methods. Recently, the RHS hosted a Greener Cities Symposium, improving the ecosystems in a climate-changing world at Wisley Gardens. This meeting brought together about 150 delegates from across the world to share their knowledge and experience on improving our cities using natural systems. Water played a very large role in that discussion as it's foundational to all the ecosystems that reduce temperature, clean the air and water, providing habitat for biodiversity and enhancing human health and well-being, as we all know. So that's a little bit about Nick's background. Without further ado, I'll hand over to Nick, and just to say, the slides Nick's using will be available to anyone who would like them afterwards. So we'll make those available. Oh, Nick, over to you. Thank you very much.
Brilliant, thank you. I need to write shorter introductions, but all good. So I'm going to talk through a few slides today. Like I say, stop me at any point or save up questions for the end. I'm going to focus on climate change as it affects water availability and the implications of that for our green spaces and the services they provide. So if somebody just gives me a little thumbs up if they get to see some slides. Cool. Okay, so hopefully. So I just wanted to start off with this picture here and get us to think a little bit about what the future might look like. You know, is our future London going to be this kind of maybe a green oasis on the left, or are we heading for this more desert world where water is much more limited and we don't have as nice a place to live? It's amazing what you can do now with a couple of little queries into ChatGTP. So yeah, what does the future hold? Before we start, I'd just like to introduce RHS and our group called Environmental Services a little bit more. Royal Horticultural Society was founded in about 1804, and since then it's been promoting the science, art and practice of horticulture. And we're really pleased that the first word here is science, the science of horticulture, but recognizing that there's an art and a practice to that. So it's a large organization, completely member-based. There's about 620,000 members, and their membership fee funds the gardens, all of the charity work, and of course a little bit of science as well. Across the UK, there are 5 gardens. Hopefully you're all aware of Wisley out near Guildford. That'll be our closest. But we're also down in Kent, in Hyde Hall, Rosemore in Devon, Harlow Carr up in Yorkshire, near to where I'm from, and most recently Bridgewater near Manchester, so Salford way. Roughly about 3 million people per year visit these gardens, and they're like a showcase for the best that we can do with horticulture. And recently we've been using them more to educate people on what green space do for you, how you can take this home and improve your environment. As I said, it's a charity place, so there's many volunteers that help out. So there's more volunteers than staff, but we do have around about 100 scientists. So if you think of us as one unit, we're quite a decent sized university department. That'd be kind of the analogous idea. We estimate there's about 28 million gardeners in the UK, and we're here to support every one of them. Hopefully, a lot of you as well. The pictures shown here are mainly from we call that the Jericho Canal. It's one of our kind of, isn't it? The bottom right is a new building, and this is where we hold all of our garden science. So we call it Hilltop, on top of the hill, and it's the home of gardening science. So if you ever visit, do come and see us here. And we talk every day about the kind of work we do. Down the bottom, I just wanted to illustrate kind of the different landscapes as well. And this is the approach that I take to my work, is I want to understand how much water do we need to maintain these landscapes, either at a plant level or consolidated whole. And where's that water going to come from? So how do we manage our resources to maintain and have these things thrive? I'll step on because this isn't an information, an advertisement. Quickly, the environmental horticulture team is pictured on the left here. We're quite a small team, and I've had to staple a picture of myself into the top right there because I arrived recently after this picture was taken. To the left, we have Mark Gush on the back row. Mark, I saw you in the audience tonight. Thank you for coming. Across on the right, this is kind of an overview of all of the different areas of science that we look at to help deliver these services. So it's focused around plants, water, people, and soils, and how all of these things interact to give to cool our cities, to clean our water, to clean our air, to look after human well-being. And if you do want to get into more detail, it's a very readable article. I've given the citation down the bottom there. Another way is to go to the RHS website on the bottom left. So across to London, enough of that. I was surprised at just how green London is. I'm sure you all know these numbers far better than I. But in the Greater London area, 47% of the area is counted as green space. And so I put it into this little chart here. The numbers are hectares. So we can see that parks and gardens are quite a large chunk, about a sixth, nearly 10,000 hectares. And we also have a large amount of private vegetated space as well. Gardens, domestic gardens, as well as the parks and other gardens. So a quarter of London is kind of cultivated, is not kind of just left as unoccupied. And I think this offers a really important opportunity for us to influence what's planted there and the benefits that can bring to us. Just before I go on from this, do you recognize these numbers as being roughly right?
Certainly, I do. As sort of a rough approximation, I wouldn't have known it was exactly 47%, but it's in the ballpark that I would assume.
Yeah, I think by some definitions, you could say that London is a forest, but not quite.
Yeah.
Okay. Moving on to look at the UK wide, so just a little bit greater. Usually 30% of an urban area is garden, so it's a little bit higher than that in London, but more of that garden is paved. So more of that potentially green space is paved. I think it was 14% green in London. These areas are really quite big. I'm not going to try and convert it into counties or size of Wales or something. But what we have here is a very large green space, and it's accessible to nearly everybody in the country. So we can bring these benefits to many people by maintaining these spaces really, really well. Okay, the reason we're here is because the future is going to be different to the past. And I just wanted to share a little bit of work that I've done looking at what we think our climate's going to be like now and in the future, and how that's going to impact our green spaces. So in the top right, we've got this this kind of stripy diagram from the UK Met Office, and it's showing our annual temperature. So each year is a single stripe. Dark blue is cooler, and red is hotter. So what we're seeing over the last, how long is that? About 150 years. We've gone from mainly blue to mainly red. Each year seems to be tending towards being hotter. That has really important implications for the comfort that we have in our cities, but also plant growth and plant survival. Across on the left, I've also included some forecasts for predicted rainfall. And we can see here, that's the blue bars, that we're going to move from a situation where we get a decent amount of rainfall in most months, through to a situation where the winters are wetter and the summers are drier. So, we're going to have warmer summers, greater plant demand for water at just the time when we've got less rainfall occurring. So how's that going to impact our landscapes and what they can do? I like numbers and statistical approaches to things. So what I've done is I've broken this out here just to show you month by month how things are changing. So on the left, we've got rainfall, and I've got three versions of the same graph. So the top panel is the past, 1990 to 2000. The middle panel is round about now, 2030. And the bottom panel is the future. And then so each column you can see a different month. And what we're seeing is this situation of now where you've got decent amount, 40, 50 millimeters of rainfall each month. That changes into the future. So by 2070, we're expecting to have a prolonged dry season in the summer, and the winters will be much, much wetter. The total difference in rainfall for the year is it's not really different. It's very similar. It's just the timing of when we're going to get this rainfall.
So is it reasonably, incredibly simplistic, but is it reasonable to suggest that if there was more storage capacity within the country, at least some of the reduction in rainfall in the summer could be mitigated?
It is, but storing useful amounts of water is difficult because you need a very large area.
Yeah.
A very large volume. So if we think about 1 millimeter of rainfall, so 1 millimeter on 1 square meter of soil, that's 1 liter. And when you start thinking about hectares, so 1 millimeter over 1 hectare is 10 cubic meters, 10,000 liters, 10 tons. You very rapidly get to a stage where you're unable to store those volumes in a sensible way.
I think some of us are having trouble seeing the slides. Oh, there we go. At least that's popped through on my slide just now. I think the slide transitions are, there's some sort of lag maybe. Probably it's a connection thing, I think. It could be me. My Wi-Fi is not terribly good.
Mine's not great either.
Okay.
Usually it's okay, but it has popped up a little note saying low.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, as Roger said, we will be sharing the slides afterwards. So apologies if it's not appearing terribly clear at the moment.
Yeah, there's a time lag on ours as well. The chart you just referred to, Nick, has only just popped through. The previous one came through quite quickly, but
Oh no.
the latest one has only just appeared. So yeah,
Okay.
not much we can do about it because
No.
No. Anyway, it's past, present, and future, and it's showing this trend of which month rainfall will occur as we move toward drier summers and wetter winters. Across on the right hand side is an estimate of how much water plants need. So plants use photosynthesis to capture carbon and grow, and to do that they need water. But also the sunlight drives a lot of plant water use. We call it evapotranspiration. So transpiration is water through plants. I've put it into the same units here, so millimeters, and you can see we've got 120 on the left and 120, 140 on the right, again in monthly totals. What we're seeing from the past to the current to the future, there aren't huge differences in the height of the bars, but we're seeing a broadening of the summer. So our summers are going to have a higher demand in total. They're going to demand more water for longer compared to now. So just at the time when we've got less water available, we're going to want more of it to support our plants.
yeah, its transpiration level goes up quite a bit.
Okay. To simplify all that, I put it onto another chart. Give me a little thumbs up when you see it. Cool. So here, what we've got is rainfall across the horizontal line and evapotranspiration up the side. They've both got the same scale. So the diagonal line is a 1-for-1. They're balanced. In the past, we can see we had more rain than plant demand. That's the circles. We're currently kind of in the middle with the triangles, showing that the amount of rainfall roughly balances the amount of plant water demand. But in the future, the squares, we're expecting greater water demand than supply. So year on year, there's going to be a greater demand than supply. So what this means is we've got to capture the water that falls and make better use of it, direct it to the places where it's most needed. But also, and I'll talk about it later, is can we think about other water sources as well? Not just rainwater. But to me, this graph tells me that change is coming. Our landscapes are going to change. Okay, what can be done?
Well, for grow hedges and stuff in dry places.
No.
Okay, recently in the Financial Times there was an article about sponge cities. I don't know if anybody saw it, but it was quite interesting, I thought. And it's this idea of trying to put as much of the water into the soil to keep it where it falls, and then to use that to grow plants, trees, to make your city a more tolerable place to live. So down the bottom, I've got one little example of how this is done. And so this is water captured off the road, goes into the, we call it a rain garden. And what that does is it captures the water, allows you to grow a few plants and trees, but it also treats the water to make it cleaner. And it's really the idea of a sponge city is to change how we think about water in our cities. You know, for so long, the idea has been that water is it's a problem. So you've got to move it away as quickly as you can. If we're going to have green cities in the future, we need to keep that water because it's valuable. Any thoughts at this point, just on sponge cities?
I have a question, actually. Sorry, I've got my camera off to try to help the connections, but the how is the water getting from the road surfaces into the rain garden? Like, I mean, is it lower than the road surface level? I'm just curious about the mechanics about how it gets there.
Yeah, I've got a few more examples later on. But basically they've dropped the curb so that the camber of the road directs the water into this little depression.
It looks like Helen's got a question when, sorry, if you're finished.
Well, I put it in the chat. Can you hear me?
Okay, yeah.
Okay. Well, sustainable urban drainage is a technique that's widely being implemented as landscape infrastructure, and we're not very good at doing these things in Britain. So, you know, the European countries often have been much more in advance to us. But it's a way of dealing with road water runoff, heavy rainfall, and what you're trying to do with an engineered system is bound to be engineered in a city as big as London. It's actually to, as has been said, is to try and get the water into the soils and into the sorry, I've lost my words. You know, the actual groundwater, and it's to stop the flooding that we're getting into rivers, and to try to replenish our groundwaters by making sure that there's more permeable surfaces and the drainage works, because we basically, since the 1860s, completely tarmacked cities in relative terms, and also huge amounts of water runs off buildings and isn't being integrated into the soils and the substrates. So it's a very big, you know, it's a really important part of what Nicholas is talking about. Thank you.
Brilliant. I'm glad you said sustainable drainage systems and introduced this whole concept. It is something that we need to do much more of. I know that the Greater London Authority is investing heavily in doing this. You know, they're going to build thousands of these rain gardens across the town, and also in other towns across the UK. So it is changing this concept, this approach to how do we value water, and you know, rather than just piping it away and causing problems elsewhere.
Nick, if I could just raise one other question. In one of the things that seems to be likely with the changing climate is a greater intensity of rainfall, which means that although the volumes are going up, the speed at which, if you like, the volume is falling is also going up, which leads to very quickly flooding and, you know, a greater desire on an awful lot of people's part, no doubt local authorities as well, to remove that water, surface water, as fast as possible. Is there thought going into how that increase in throughput can be managed into the more sustainable groundwater that you've just been mentioning? Because otherwise you can see there would just be a huge push to, you know, increase the size of storm drains, if you like, rather than reduce them.
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. This intensity of rainfall is one of the keys here. It's not just, you know, the totals, it's how quickly does it arrive. We do expect that to increase further, and, you know, over the last month we've seen you know, some really serious storms. The key part is to slow the flow. So if we can slow the flow of water, that's, you know, by infiltration or temporarily storing it, that reduces flooding further downstream. So that's, you know, can we put the water into soil? Can we slow the flow to drains? can we reduce the totals that are moving? But yeah, intensity is a very key part. I'll move on one. Right. I wanted to talk a little bit about front gardens. I know we mainly talk about parks in this group, but you know this again builds on this impermeable surfaces and flooding due to the intensity of rainfall. And it's really, you know, we've most front gardens have been paved over to allow parking of cars, but that doesn't need to be the way to do it. You know, you can use impermeable surfaces that still give you that hard standing for your car. And I've illustrated a couple of these across on the right hand side here, you know, where you don't have to cover the whole area. And that's really all I wanted to say here. This would go a very, very long way to reducing the amount of flooding that we see. Okay, we talked about rain gardens very briefly early on, and I just wanted to show these pictures of two different approaches here. Laura, you were asking, how does the water get into the depression? Across on the right, we can see these gaps in the paving, and that allows the water to enter at controlled points. You can also do a little bit there to capture sediment, you know, to make maintenance easier. What I've got to say about this is, though, that, you know, maybe we could do something a bit more exciting with the planting. Yes, it's doing the job of capturing the water, but we could also make these things beautiful, you know, and really do a lot for people's well-being. Across on the left is something of a little bit larger scale, and it's something we can also do in our parks and larger green spaces. And you know, you might look at that and say, oh, it's just a dip, but that's actually the overflow from an area capturing runoff captured on the roof. So what happens in a storm is the excess water, rather than flooding the drains, it overflows into this area here and then slowly seeps into the floor. You know, so it fills the soil much slowly. We can also include you know, larger trees into this area to also make additional use of that water as well. Recently, we did some work up at Bridgewater, one of our new gardens, looking at, you know, how much water can be used by these rain gardens if we're capturing, attenuating this flow. And we got a number of roughly 30%. So by using green space, we can reduce roughly 30% the amount of water that ends up flooding into drains. So it's going to go slower, there's going to be less of it, it's going to be less of a problem. Okay. Moving on to our trees and our big spaces. I think I said at the start I was quite happy to steal other people's work. So this is work done by Kew, and it is published in their recent plan. You know, they've looked at their site. They're concerned about the climate changing in the next years. They've got a very, very diverse and large selection of trees, 11,000 trees across their estate. By the end of the century, 2090, they're considering that maybe half of them will have died due to increased temperature and water stress. And this could be true about all of our other green spaces across London as well. Not to the same extent, because we don't have as many weird and wonderful plants as they do. But you know, it's an illustration of changes coming. In the center here, you've got a rather complicated graph. So each black spot is a different species of tree. The green square is the current climate, and the red square is the future climate. And that allows them to kind of estimate, okay, so which sorts of trees, which species are going to be in trouble. And from that, you can then map, okay, where is our future climate? Where should we be sourcing the species and the planting materials that we're going to need in the future? So across on the right here, we've got a few areas that match that future climate that Kew think it'd be a great idea to go and look in these areas for our future trees. I think this is a really, really nice piece of work.
Can I stop you with a question here then, please? One of the things that people
Yeah.
ask us about, you know, is the sort of question of native versus non-native planting, and you know, the pressures to continue with native planting. And obviously what this graph suggests is that, you know, and something I think that many of us are experiencing in our green spaces is that, you know, some of the native species aren't doing as well. So how does, you know, how is this contributing to that sort of discussion?
I think we've lost you, Nick.
I think, yeah, I think he's frozen. Oh no. Uh-oh, I think because he's dropped out, I guess, and then
I'm hopefully
oh,
back now.
oh, here you are, yes.
Hooray. Okay, so my personal view on this kind of native versus non-native is that you got to choose the right system for the right place. You know, if you go out into the rural areas, it's absolutely right that we use native species there.
Hmm.
But when we move into an urban area, which is much hotter and drier and very different to our natural space, you know, it's this engineered city. I don't think the same restrictions apply. So I think we should be choosing plants that can deliver the environmental services that we need
Yeah.
and that are suited to that climate, that environment. So I'm okay with planting, you know, the right plant in the right place.
Hmm.
I think we're going to see this change much more quickly into the future, more quickly than a lot of people realize. Is that our cities are going to become very different to the original native landscape.
Nick, do you feel as if there is consensus around what that new planting in list, if you like, portfolio could be, or is it, you know, just sort of still sort of an emerging work as to what suits best?
Yeah, and I think it's quite plastic, you know. So I think there's a lot of work going on now to try and work out which plants deliver the services that we need. And then, you know, how acceptable is that? You know, you got to avoid invasive species. So one thing, if can you still see my screen, or was that lost?
We've
Um,
lost that at the moment.
it was lost. I wonder if I should share it, if that might reduce the demands
Yeah,
on your Wi-Fi. Yeah. Okay.
have a go.
Right. Let me.
Because what you'll notice, if you kind of look at the map closely, because it is quite zoomed out, is that kind of central France pops up as a match for London. So, you know, if you're thinking about, okay, I want to plant the same species that I've already got, maybe I could choose to in that area, so they would be more suited to our, but a different population.
It's me similar, but there are some species.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Am I sharing my screen? Sorry, it's looking a bit weird. Can you see Nick's slides?
No,
Yeah,
I can see them. Yes, they're sort of, they're not full screen, but you know, that's not essential.
Okay, I might. Yeah, I can see that it's doing that. I'm not sure why it wouldn't let me. Anyway, sorry. Maybe we'll just stay with that for now.
yeah. So I think the point I wanted to make here is that there is going to be a we're going to lose a lot of existing trees in the coming 50, 60 years due to a changing climate. We should also expect new pests and diseases. We can do a lot to maintain what we've got by making better use of our rainwater and grey water to direct to support these areas. But it's also an opportunity to bring in new species, new plants that can support us in the future.
It also seems like this, this takes a coordinated international approach, because we don't want to lose species, but if we're going to be planting things that are in France, then who's going to be planting British species?
Yeah, so we're going through exactly this with the Royal Horticultural Society right now. So we're looking at our rhododendrons, but also at our heather collection, and we're moving it further north. So to cooler, wetter places.
Yeah.
And there is going to be an element of that. Should we move on to the next one? I think it's about hedges.
Sure. Wait, there we go. Can you see that?
Hopefully soon. Yeah. So here I just wanted to make the case that hedges can do a lot to capture rainfall, reducing, so attenuating this flow, reducing the amount of flow or the speed of that flow into our drains and our waterways. And that the tree species that you choose can be, better or worse for different situations. So in the winter, because they still have leaves on, evergreens are better at using water, so emptying the soil so it can capture more. And plants with large canopies or dense canopies are better at capturing rain. And again, we've done some work to identify which are the better species that we've tested so far. But anytime you get an opportunity, should I build a wall or a fence? Maybe you should plant a hedge, and we can do a lot that way. Hedges also support biodiversity very well. They also take pollution out of the air, and they also reduce noise as well. So they've got many, many fantastic benefits.
I feel at this point I should probably mention CPRE London's offer to support friends groups planting hedges. So if that's something that you're thinking about for your green space, please do get in touch, and I can put you in touch with my colleagues there. Because yes, I completely agree about hedges and hedgerows being excellent.
Brilliant. I'm just conscious of time, so slide 18 is just highlighting one thing that we did a few years ago, more and more relevant as time goes by. Is we ran a campaign we called Mains to Rains, and the idea there is to support gardeners or people using mains water for irrigation, maybe, to switch from a main supply to a rain supply. So to water the way that nature intended. If anybody's interested, there's a little link in the bottom left there that will take you to an RHS linked website, giving 10 things that each individual can do, which will go a long way to many of the things we've already talked about today in slowing water, making better use of rainwater. Has anybody heard of Mains to Rains before? Okay. Slide 19. I just wanted to highlight that I've stressed that we're going to be restricted in the amount of rainwater that we have at the right time of year, and that we're not going to be able to use mains water. So one alternative is grey water, and this is the water that we use for washing either ourselves or our dishes, or showering. So it's reasonably clean water, and the idea is that this water can be reused, and it can either be reused at a domestic scale or at a larger kind of community scale if we can get the plumbing right. So RHS is leading research at the moment to build kind of domestic scale grey water treatment systems about a metre square, which will allow us to use grey water to support our planted spaces. But I can see much more of this coming in the future, to support our parks as well.
I think that it's a really difficult one because, collecting water for green spaces can be really difficult if many of us don't have any buildings on site or buildings, but then the rest of the green space is so large, it's very difficult to, use only water-bought water, or but there are some interesting things that other groups have done. Like there was one who used neighboring properties and collected grey water and roof water from those sites and connected it with a pipe so that they were able to use the water from adjacent houses. But I think it would be great to get more innovations in this area to help more green spaces in urban areas.
Yeah, one of the big challenges that you've got is boundaries. All of these different bodies controlling different parts. So water can be valued and used.
We lost you a bit there, Nick.
That's okay. I'll move to slide 20, which I hope is conclusions.
Okay.
Hey. Yeah. So I just wanted to highlight that change is coming. That we're going to have different supply but increased demand. We're going to have to change our infrastructure, and this is an opportunity to cultivate a wider variety of plants. If we can reduce the amount of impermeable surfaces in our cities will be greener, cooler, more pleasant places to live. And then these four kind of tenets of the mains to rains of slowing the flow of water, building healthy soils so they can hold more water and support more plants. Roots help water to enter the soil, so again it's reducing the amount that ends up in the wrong place. And where we can, to collect rain. So that's all I have for today. Hopefully it's given you an overview of kind of some of the thinking that we're using at the RHS.
Okay, well, thank you very much indeed, Nick. That was absolutely fascinating. I appreciate that for some of us, the tech side of it didn't quite work some of the time, but that's not your fault or our fault. It's lack of capacity in the internet, I guess. But yeah, that was an incredibly interesting talk. There's a lot of material there to digest and think about. And thank you for including some of those links in the slides as well, which I think give us a place where we can go and sort of do some more research and thinking. Can I just ask people if there were any other questions or points that people would like to make?
Okay, so someone just reiterated that they are looking forward to seeing the slides later, so I will be sure to send those out. And another person said that their green space is collecting rainwater off sheds that border the park. So yeah, I think that's a useful point.
I guess the first thing is, in terms of either grey water or more collection of rainfall, is properties close to or adjacent to open spaces, and what could be done to work with the owners of those properties to start a greater degree of water diversion.
That's it. And as long as things don't get legal, all confused and all of that, and a lot is possible with goodwill.
Yeah. Is this something that UK local authorities, I mean, we appreciate it's sort of on their agenda, because how could it not be, in a sense? But is it and a subject area that they are at least actively thinking about? Or is it something you think, it would help if individual groups raise the issue with their own local authority and try to sort of prod them into a bit more action?
I think there's a lot of thought, down these lines, across many places. So Surrey County Council has an active set. Sheffield's very interested. Birmingham was down at the Green Cities Symposium. Lots of places are thinking about how do they manage their water resources, mainly roundabout flooding.
Yeah, which obviously from the local authority's point of view is probably the top issue for them, because I was in central London yesterday, in the Euston Road, where there was a very large area of surface water which was being pumped into a tanker. And presumably what's going to happen is once they've finished, that tanker load of water is going to go and be just discharged into a watercourse, rather than actually putting somewhere where it would be of some use. Changing, simple things like that, changing that habit of doing that, when the tanker's emptied, empty it into the ground rather than into a watercourse.
It's probably horribly contaminated from the road.
It probably is, but still done into the ground will be better than into a river. We lost you again.
No, I'm here.
Yeah, sorry.
Nothing to say.
Okay, right. Anything from anybody else? No. Okay, well, I hope everybody has found that as interesting and useful way to spend an hour as I have. It's been absolutely fascinating, Nick, and thank you very, very much indeed for your time and energy in putting this together. We will take it back to the wider group anyway, and I know through Laura we'll make it available to a wider audience, and see if we can start getting some conversations going. And if people start to make some progress, and particularly with their local authorities, well, we'll perhaps sort of put a note back to you about what individual organisations have been able to achieve.
Yeah.
Hi, we couldn't I can't find the hand raise. This is Brent, part of the Wildstone Brook Mogden catchment partnership with Harrow. We've got an awful lot going on. Sorry, I'm a bit late. I was rubbish clearing in parks and I forgot. Basically, we're dealing a lot with the council, the engineer. This has been many years. In fact, one of our main flood mitigation volunteers has got a CBE for his work and recognised by the Rivers Trust for his work. He's now getting quite old, so we're trying to come on the back of his work and continue it for the sake of him, let alone anything else. We're looking at water attenuation, meandering, looking at the hyporheic zone. There's an awful lot that we could share, and how the hyporheic zone works for cleaning the river, and also a meandering river rather than an engineered brook, which is what we've got. So we're looking at trying to open things up within a park, and some water attenuation throughout the borough. And we're working with Thames 21, part of the catchment partnership with the Silk Stream, etc. Ealing, Brent, Barnet and Harrow.
Sounds fantastic.
Yeah, thank you, Suzanne.
More frustrating than anything, but yes, no, they're wonderful. The River Crane, they've done a training session with us, a webinar for their work, and they're very inspiring. We're just, really navigating through what we can do our end with the engineer. We've got very willing in Harrow, not so willing in Brent. We're trying to keep this all live, and we keep bringing it up with every scrutiny committee, cabinet. When there was the you realm, use it. If there is a cabinet meeting renewing their climate emergency policy, because Brent declared a climate and ecological emergency, use that consultation to put in a document to state flooding and state where it is, and use their document and reference the points and get councillors involved. That's what we're doing.
Okay, that sounds.
We also work with Brent Friends of the Earth, so work with Friends of the Earth to take that forwards as well, because we tack on to their campaign meetings as well.
Okay, thank you, Suzanne. That's very, very encouraging.
And I put the Camellia project in the chat, which is all about water attenuation as well, through Thames Water at the moment. They're still with us, and Thames 21 we hope will be. There's been lots of work there through Camellia, so I put it in the chat.
Yes, I noticed that. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
We
Nick,
had oh, sorry, go ahead, Roger.
I think my understanding is the water table in the London Basin is generally getting higher. Is that true? Or is it, or is it not?
So when I thought it was about 86 meters beneath what it would naturally be because so much had been pumped out, but that was a long time ago. Things probably have changed.
And I was speaking to somebody at Imperial who was focused on water retention, particularly in the London area, and from him, my understanding was that generally London water tables have started to rise again in the past few years. That doesn't mean to say, I mean, that may be minus 86 to minus 85. We're not necessarily talking about coming up to the surface. But I just wondered, if there was any work that you or the RHS had looked at about how water table levels generally in London and the South East were in relation to, sort of how much additional rainwater can be accommodated in the groundwater.
No, we're more kind of planty than than such depths.
Yeah.
Just really quickly, we've had a really good question in the chat about where to go for suggestions for tree species to plant going forward. So I mean, the map was really useful in terms of like thinking sort of globally. Just how do people get ideas for what would be most suitable now, or thinking into the future?
Okay. So we've got some good suggestions on the RHS website, of course.
Great.
But if you drop me a note, put me in touch directly, and I'll link people up.
Super, thank you.
Okay, that'd be great. Thank you. Anything from anybody else?
Suzanne's
Willows.
just put in the chat, willows and salix species are recommended. Oh, Helen's got her hand up.
Yeah, I'll just clarify something a little bit about the London water table. In the late 1980s to 90s, there was a massive restoration of the lakes in Battersea Park. And one of the problems was that the topping up was taken from the Thames, which was nutrient rich and full of sewerage and all the rest of it, just as it was now. And it made the lakes very unhealthy as a water body. And eventually the research came back that we were going to be allowed. I worked on the restoration project there. The the evidence was found that the loss of extractive industries like tanneries and brewers and all that sort of thing in London has actually meant that the rates of extraction from the water table from the aquifers is not as high. And so there has been a general increase in the levels. And so we were allowed to have a borehole installed so that we were pumping aquifer water to top up the lakes. And it almost within 2 years had just increased the quality of the water at Battersea, which meant that more plants could grow happily there in the water and on the edges, and that the the natural habitat just improved immensely. So there's lots of things that can be done, but it does require a lot of careful planning and thinking and investigation as to why you're doing things. And I think, I'm a retired landscape architect, so I've been involved in many of the kind of projects that are looking at things like the connections between waterfall, species choice, how you treat the soils. It is an area that requires a lot more dissemination to everybody, and it's really great to hear that RHS have got such a big team, and it's one of the focuses of the study. And I think the other thing I just wanted to say was that there's the way that our landscapes and gardens look are very lush, actually, unless it's very, very dry, like we had 2 years ago. And I think, and they're also often very tidy. And I think there's a big cultural work to do on how people's aesthetic view, when you look at something, and how it appears, is very much impacted by our horticultural history. And it's tidy, mown lawns, clipped hedges, and that I think we've got to try to learn to be more relaxed and more open to change in the structure of our vegetation. That's not just from what would have been considered a native or an ecological habitat, but also from a cultural perspective of how we look at gardens and how we appreciate landscapes. We've got to help people to understand it may not be always to be able to be like this. It's got to change, and it will change. It will change anyway, because we'll lose things, and obviously other things come in to take over.
Yeah.
There's no such thing as a piece of bare soil, is there? So, anyway, thank you, and I really enjoyed looking at the slides and listening to everybody. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, Helen. That's. I mean, I think the point you make about public education and perception of how they see landscapes, I think is very, very important. Nick, sort of as part of what you're doing, that I guess is sort of has to be at some point a key activity for RHS in public education, and setting an expectation that these things are going to change and how they are going to change.
Yep, I know that Edward wants to come in, but just before then, this change in aesthetic, understanding a more naturalistic, relaxed planting, I think that is the way that the organisation, but also the industry, is going. So no, it's good to hear that it's supported.
Yeah, Edward.
Yes, very, very briefly. I'm Ted Inman. I chair the trust that runs Jubilee Gardens next to the London Eye, which I'm very sympathetic to the idea of letting things grow more, but with 5 million people a year expecting to be able to sit on nicely maintained grass, impacting it horrendously. It's not easy to follow that. But the point I want to make actually was more about water table and extraction. We've looked very hard. There's a big borehole under the Royal Festival Hall. Looked very hard at satisfying our huge irrigation needs, which we must find a way of reducing. From that borehole, it is very saline. I'm told by water experts it's not because it's right next to the Thames. It just is. And it needs a lot of, and there's a really difficult balance between the chemicals and electricity used treating it and the fact that it's in effect grey water. So it's an area where I'd be grateful for sources of more advice on as well. We use, in dry summers we use 30,000 litres a night, which is terrible. I think we'll stop doing that. But if you're going to keep it really green, under that sort of footfall, that's your only option.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, thank you. Any other points?
It looks like
Okay.
Job's got her hand up.
Go on, Laura.
No, I said Joe's got her hand up.
Right. Oh yes, sorry, Joe.
Sorry, I was speaking and can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, sorry. It was echoing largely what Helen was saying, that our parks are a way to link the public with the changing planting requirements that we're talking about. And in our park, for example, it's quite sort of curated at the front of it. And for years, we've had 4 flower beds full of seasonal planting. And we're gradually working with the council to move away from the seasonal bedding and get permanent shrub borders in there. So, you know, that's a positive thing. And it's just that is a sign to the public of a different way of enjoying planted areas.
Yeah, that's good to hear. Thank you. Yes. And there has been, sometimes through cost pressure, a change in the way that parks have been planted, just simply to reduce the amount of, annual planting. But it's also good to see how it is changing. But I think point, and to re-emphasize Nick's points from earlier on, it's going to have to change a lot more. Sort of central southern France parks are nothing like what we see currently and expect to see in a park in England. And they are quite different. So there's is a very big education program to do to get people to accept the change that's coming. Okay, right. Anything from anybody else? No. Okay, well, any last comments from you, Nick, or shall we wrap up there? And I will say, a really huge thank you from all of us for the time and making the presentation, which has been absolutely, well, both fascinating and informative. And I think it's just the start of a conversation that the LFGN network needs to continue to have in the future.
Well, thank you for the conversation and the opportunity to to share a little bit of our work. So if anybody wants to carry on this conversation, please do get in touch.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.